Hey everybody, Eric Schweitzer here today with Jade King.
I'm gaming. I've done a lot of gaming lately, Eric.
We're here for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the sequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake, the remake to Final Fantasy VII. And boy, what a game. Am I right? I don't know. Am I right? I haven't played it.
Oh, you are right, Eric.
I am
I
right.
scored this. Congratulations. You are right. I've been playing this game for, I don't know, just over 2 weeks now. And it took me about, about 60 to 65 hours to finish the main story. And I've since gone back and played about, I don't know, like 85 hours in total. I scored it 9 out of 10. It is more or less everything I wanted this game to be, and it also throws in a few unexpected surprises, especially as someone who loved Remake and loves the original game, but was incredibly fearful about how Square Enix were going to take this open world and give it to us in a modern context. Like, there was so much they could have messed up, but thankfully they don't, and the majority of this game is quite remarkable. Like, I don't think I've been stuck into a game this much since, I don't know, maybe Alan Wake 2, or in terms of RPGs, maybe the original Remake. I don't know. I'm probably going to gush a lot because I've really enjoyed this.
Okay, cool. It's interesting, the Final Fantasy VII remakes. This is the only Final Fantasy VII, the only Final Fantasy I've completed was a remake.
Oh, fascinating.
I've played lots, but this one I pulled me all the way through, and it's funny that we got 16 last year, and yet this sequel to the remake of 7 feels more of like a mainline big event Final Fantasy game than the actual mainline new Final
It really
Fantasy
does.
game did.
Like, it's setting the world on fire. Like, for context, today is release day, and like everyone at work's excited about it. You go on Twitter and people are simping for it, something fierce, especially like certain characters, But you're right. I'm curious to you, like, as someone who, you said this is the only Final Fantasy you've played.
Yeah.
Did you struggle with like the lack of like prior knowledge from the original, or did you arguably find it more compelling with all of the wild stuff it ends up doing?
I think 7 is so embedded in cultural zeitgeist that I have just like through osmosis.
You know what happens anyway.
Yeah, so I like there. Obviously, there was a lot of stuff I learned in characters and I met for the first time, but I picked up on the idea that this is a retelling of 7, and that even though I haven't played the original, is a very interesting aspect of it. I assume we're not going to immediately jump into really deep spoilers here, but I assume that's a big part of the sequel too, right?
Yeah, I'd say, for context, I assume a lot of people listening to this have played the original Final Fantasy VII Remake. It takes place entirely within Midgar, and Rebirth starts like immediately after that game finishes. Like, you're escaping Shinra, you're getting out of Midgar, and you're like recalling Cloud's past in Nibelheim, and you're doing that for a few hours before you're unleashed into the open world, which in the context of Rebirth is from leaving Midgar to the end of the original game. It would have been Disc 1, which is like the Forgotten Capital, where something very tragic happens, obviously, and it turns what in the original game, I suppose, is like maybe 15 hours of gameplay into this surprisingly sprawling and in-depth RPG, which, as I mentioned from the off, I was worried it was going to be bloated and insubstantial, and a lot of the stuff wouldn't be worth doing. But Final Fantasy VII Rebirth does a really good job of building on like the characters and the storytelling devices and gameplay mechanics of Remake, and makes like everything worth doing, and everything feels rewarding to the point where I'm like, oh, this really does feel like the next mainline Final Fantasy, or what I'd like to see from this series going forward. It elicits similar feelings to like the ground adventures you'd see in Final Fantasy 7, 8, or 9, or 10, like back in the heyday, like 2 decades ago, which I don't think 16 quite accomplished. It was more of like a condensed Game of Thrones season, which was excellent in some ways, but to me it wasn't Final Fantasy. To me, like, this is the good shit. This is Final Fantasy.
Yeah, that hybrid in the battle system between the like tactical turn-based and the real-time action.
Yeah.
That feels very quintessential now to Final Fantasy, even though it's sort of unique to Remake. I guess it's sort of built on what 15 was doing, right? And then 16 kind of throws that all away for just regular action.
It's very Devil May Cry, like 16.
Yeah, but this is what the people want from Final Fantasy.
Yeah, this is the revolution, as it were.
So how does it change from Remake?
I'd say it's pretty faithful in terms of gameplay mechanics.
Yeah,
because you've still got the same battle system beneath it all. Like you're still managing materia, summons. You start at level 15 now, and the level cap goes up to 70. And I think like 80 hours in, I'm currently like level 58. So there's a lot of like end of game stuff that is going to bump you up to that level. But a lot of the same characters return. New additions are Kate Sif and Yuffie, who was also in the DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Retrograde?
Intergrade? Episode intermission. Intergrade. It's some Kingdom Hearts naming conventions bullshit. It really is. But the moment-to-moment like battles that are quite similar. But there's this new thing called synergy skills, where they kind of act like limit breaks. Like if you use one normal skill, you'll fill up a gauge where you can eventually use a synergy skill, which has two characters working together to do these like super powerful, slickly animated sequences, which can both turn the tide of battle and also look cool as shit. And they like, we'll get onto more of like the relationship affinity stuff later, but they also help with that. And there's these smaller synergy attacks. Like if you press hold R1, you can use some which you might like buff an ally or grow more powerful or deal some damage. And once again, that like factors in the cool relationship dynamics. And I think that's as far as like the battle differences go, but synergy makes it more beneficial to like switch between people in your party and stuff like that, because it felt like before you could just rely on Cloud for the entire game if he got OP, and you could like put everyone else aside. But this makes it more engrossing, and I think I'm still not tired of the combat, and I'm still trying new things this late on in the game, which is quite impressive. And they also tease the addition of Vincent Valentine and Sid Highwind, who are like two new characters who are a bit more late game. But like Red 13 in the original, he doesn't like join your party properly until the end of the game. So Square Enix hasn't like built those combat systems yet. So they'll come in the next one. But that's kind of the gist of combat, whereas exploration is vastly expanded. Like you'll explore really large settlements, and I think there's 6 regions in total, which are kind of like miniature open worlds in themselves, filled with like a handful of quests and things to do. But they never feel too big. They're surprisingly focused in the stuff you do, not being too overwhelming or feeling like fodder, while also a lot of the side quests are like themed around certain characters, so they'll tell like miniature stories, which really helps to both flesh them out and feed into the main narrative in ways I didn't expect. Because after 16, which their side quests were like well scripted and enjoyable from like a storytelling perspective, but my god, they were like the driest thing ever. Like, you would just be, Clive would be like, well, I guess I must go and kill this dog that's in a field somewhere, and like that would kind of be it. But in this, there's like a really cute quest where Tifa finds her childhood cat and she's asked to go like save it, and then she brings it home with a bunch of kittens, and then she plays a piano, and then her and Cloud have like a heart-to-heart, or like Aerith and Cloud go taking pictures of like constellations in Cosmo Canyon, and like there's really cute interactions and like unique gameplay mechanics that only appear in these side quests. So it kind of like feels like It Takes Two or something. It like introduces a new mechanic, and you're like, oh, that's cool, and then it never outstays its welcome, or it goes away. And it manages to do that kind of thing in a way where I didn't expect it to. I sort of expected to drill through the story and avoid all of the guff, kind of like I did in Remake. But as I was like reviewing it, and I kept seeing like, I need to push forward, but there's a few side quests here that are going to build towards strengthening the character relationships, and I was like bitterly leaving those behind, which is a testament to how well Rebirth does some of this stuff. Sorry, I feel like I just went on for like 5 minutes.
It's
a good game.
especially compared to 16, which we're gonna keep doing because it just came out. Like
It's
it,
16's good. It's not as good as this. I'll be
yeah.
very honest.
But from everything that I see getting shared, it's very like saccharine. It's very fan
Oh, so
servicey. It's like cozy game qualities all throughout. It's like, yeah, I think they just like recognize how much people love these characters and just gave everything you want with these characters.
Yeah, it really does, because that was one thing I feared. It would lean into that fan service stuff too much. And it does, don't get me wrong. There's like, when you sneak into Junon Harbor, you have to like disguise yourself in the original. And like Tifa and Aerith also get the outfits and they're posing and doing loads of cute shit. And same with like the swimsuits that are all over Twitter and stuff like that. It is very fan servicey, and it leans into like the appreciation and nostalgia that people already have for these characters in this world, but it simultaneously gives them more depth and more effective writing, to the point where I was going on quests just to hear like small lines of dialogue from people or to hear their perspectives on stuff, and it fleshes it out in all directions where it feels a bit more than fan service. If anything, it feels like we know you already love these characters, but we're going to take them further and do some really cool shit with them, as opposed to just relying on that familiarity to get by, which we've seen other games do.
Yeah.
And this could have done that, but yeah, there were a few points in this game where I legit got quite choked up because I'm a giant wuss, but also because the game does a really good job of engrossing you in that kind of stuff.
And then you talked a little bit about the open world stuff, but again, 16 sort of had open world sections, which were very boring.
The public really turned on that game, didn't they?
If I'm the public, then yeah, I've turned on that game.
No, because that game has like astonishing highs in the campaign, in the storyline, but then you do the side stuff and it's just like, yeah, the cutscenes, the music, some of the character stuff is great.
Yeah,
but then they try and do side quests, and it's like the worst shit in 14.
Right.
Like most of that game is boring. Sorry.
Yeah, MMO
but it's
quality,
like that stuff. Yeah, like MMO quality.
Quests.
That's the way to describe it, and it makes sense given where that team came from. But this team is like this. The side quests in this are like The Witcher 3 caliber. That's like how I describe them in terms of like engrossing and like storytelling stuff.
Almost like small campaigns, like,
yeah, and a lot of them connect. Like you'll do one side quest in one region, and then like 15 hours later you might get a notification going, oh, this new quest's available here, and you'll go back and like someone else is like, oh, it's you again, can you help me out with this? Because probably the best example of that is there's a chocobo ranch you meet in the first region, and by the end of the game you're like helping him piece together what happened to his parents, and like talking to his sister and competing in the Chocobo Cup at the Gold Saucer because he thinks that's the only way I'm going to find out the truth. And when you do, it leads to like some cutscenes and stuff, which are entirely optional, but they feel like equivalent to the stuff you'd see in the main campaign in terms of quality and stuff. So they've really thought about, okay, like here's how we can make you care. At some points, too many people from Remake can just appear out of convenience, like side characters and stuff, where I would have preferred for them to introduce more new ones. But I guess that's like a small thing to forgive, especially if they're going a whole trilogy and they'd like to keep it consistent.
Is there any evolution to the gear? Because that was the thing that was most disappointing about Remake, was you would get a new piece, you'd put it on, and that was it. And the materia had some choice to it, a little bit of like build crafting, but not enough for me. What about this one?
I'd say it's complicated. It's probably the best way to describe it, because I described the synergy stuff earlier, and those can often account like elemental spells and so on, so they can lessen the necessity of like materia combos or whatever, because you'd already be using elemental spells and taking advantages of weaknesses due to other stuff in your repertoire. So as a consequence, like materia takes even more of a back seat, whereas in the original game, like back in 97, you could like alter entire battles with like one materia change, and that's not the case here, unfortunately. I think like materia still plays a part, and it's always worthwhile to upgrade it, but I'd always be focusing more on like how much damage are my weapons doing, what accessories do I have equipped, and so on, before I'd look at materia. On the other side, there is like a new crafting system now, which you can access at any time from the menu. Oh, I dropped something. You can access at any time from the menu, which essentially allows you to craft like healing items, accessories, and some other key items, where like that's really engrossing and it gives you XP on all sides, regardless of what you do. So I feel like there's more depth to the systems this time around, but at the cost of one another. So like, because synergy skills are a thing now, materia is less prevalent. And like, because you can now craft all of your accessories, there's much less of a need to go to the shops and stuff. I found that like, whenever I'd go to a shop, I'd see like, oh, I already have all these weapons because I've crafted all of them. So they'd almost be superfluous in a way.
Right.
Oh, and there's also this new thing called like the Folios system, which are like these books that you collect, and you get like a party level and SP, and those are how you unlock like different skills and so on, which is cool because I love the synergy skills, but also I kept going back there and just like getting random buffs that I suppose made me more powerful, but they didn't feel impactful. It was just like, oh, I do an extra 2% SP damage or some bullshit, whereas like I'm gonna get it because I've got the SP, but it's not that important.
Okay, and then I think we'll do like a round table, more spoiler cast kind of thing.
Because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, next week. But let's talk a little bit about the story direction.
Okay.
What do you think? I mean, obviously there's some big changes here from the original one, right?
Can I spoil how the game starts? Is that
right? Yeah, I think
that
that's
game
fine.
now? Because the game's out, right?
Yeah.
So the game starts and you're playing as Zach.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
You're playing for him for like 10 minutes, and then it's clear that everyone has died. You're in like an alternate universe or something, and it's clear that everyone has died in the Shinra attack, except Cloud and Aerith, who you then save. And then throughout the game, you're kind of flashing back to this reality, as it were. Like, it's taking place in a different timeline or a different universe or whatever. And the game is clearly building up on that. But aside from that, you then zap back to wherever the remake takes place, I guess. And it's like fairly faithful to the original, but they're constantly alluding to the fact that something's wrong, like something's off. Like Tifa is constantly going, oh, Cloud, you were never in our hometown 5 years ago when it burnt down. What are you on about? She like confronts him about that, and Aerith and Red 13 are clearly like in the know about fate and like the whispers, like way more than everyone else is, and it builds on that in some interesting ways to a final act. I will not spoil here.
Yeah.
But it wasn't nearly as Kingdom Heartsy as I expected it to be. By the end, I was like, okay, that's a bit silly, but it's no sillier than the end of the first game.
Yeah. But it's also is predicated on understanding the original Final Fantasy.
100%. I will say that it doesn't go off the deep end by the end. I think it plays its cards mostly how you'd expect them to. Like, take that with how you will. Like, obviously knowing what happens at the end of Disc 1 of Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah.
But I think the way it tells its story is incredibly effective. And like, it makes you fall in love with its characters and doesn't get too boggled down in like the metaversal nonsense. It does by the end in some interesting ways. But I don't know. I think I love these characters enough to forgive some of the inconsistencies with the wider narrative framing. But that's just me talking. Maybe it depends how much of like an appetite you have for this crap.
Right, yeah. Any criticisms?
Too many mini games.
Yeah. That's all I see online is people sharing the mini games. So I know people like them, but it also seems like it's a bit of a distraction.
They're all pretty great. Don't get me wrong. But when you're like 50 hours in and I started a new line of side quests and it introduced a new strategy mini game, I was like, nah. We ain't doing this Final Fantasy. And it was probably comes from the frame of mind of having to finish it at a set amount of time.
Sure,
like,
yeah.
All of these minigames are great, like really solidly developed. Most of them control well. Like the Chocobo racing in this is like a fully built up Mario Kart game. Like it's crazy. Like there's a whole like Grand Prix GP. It's better than Chocobo GP, like that piece of shit Switch game. Like you edit, like you give them different clothes and stats, and like it's got a whole quest line to it, and it's really impressive. There's like G-Bike is back, that's really good. Fort Condor is in here. There's a lot of like just little distractions that are excellent, but God, they do introduce too many of them at a clip, and I hate the Moogle ones. The Moogle ones suck. You have to like gather these Moogles within a set amount of time and without being hit a couple of times by like moving them, but they're just little bastards and it's just not fun. I'm like, I want to buy the stuff you have when I catch all of you, but this sucks. I did all of it, but oh my God. I think criticisms. Some of the voice acting, but I think that's just me being overly critical. And I'm scared about where the third game will go, like whether it will divert too much or remain overly faithful to the original. It's really unclear what it might end up doing. I've just been saying this game is good for 20 minutes, but it is. Like, I'm relieved with how good it is because I thought they'd kill their momentum and make like a bloated mess that is like incomprehensible in terms of narrative and characters. But it doesn't. It kind of like sticks the landing with most of the stuff it does, aside from like the quibbles I mentioned with the materia and a few too many mini games. And I'd say some of the I did this in the original. With your party, you end up getting like Cloud, Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, Red, your mainstays, and then there's the rejects. So you kind of just put them into a pile. Like, I'm never going to use you unless I have to. Oh no, this has got me onto another thing. There are certain sections throughout the game where the game will have you control people who aren't Cloud for like an hour or two, like both to flesh out their stories and to like shake up the gameplay in a way. So Yuffie is able to grapple onto certain points on the map and like act as a platformer, while Barrett can shoot objects, and Kate Sif does these awful block throwing puzzles like later on in the game, and they sucked. So that's worth pointing out. They weren't hard, they were just felt unnecessary. I was just like, can I just get through this section to carry on with the story and not kill 15 bloody minutes trying to solve this puzzle? It's little things like that where they're trying a bit more than they probably should, like overextending themselves.
Yeah, it's so funny that it's not like filler the way that like the Final Fantasy 16 side missions were. It's like a lot of effort was put into these things that are just kind of boring.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's like, oh, I see what you're doing here and it's well done, but it doesn't need to be here.
Yeah,
because the open world doesn't feel like that for most of the time. Like, normally when you scan like the towers, there's only like 3 or 4 things it shows you, and you can still discover those things on your own if you don't want to do the tower approach, which is cool. And it's just like little things like battles or summon crystals or chocobo ranches and stuff, like very minor things that kind of build out the world and give you extra lore in the menus to read into. So when it does make those mistakes or does trip up, it's more noticeable. Oh, and Tifa and Aerith aren't gay, so that's like 6 out of 10, I think.
That's why you had to take a point off?
Yeah, people have already told me to kill myself a lot over this game, so it's fine.
What else is new in game?
Yeah, right? Love you guys.
That's great. I am excited to play it. Like I said, the remake was the first Final Fantasy I finished. And for me, mostly it was how cool the battle system was.
It's even better in this one. I think they build upon it in some small but subtle ways, but it's like, oh wow, this just feels kick-ass to play.
Yeah, I kind of felt like I had to just sort of put up with like Cloud putting on the dress and doing the dance number, and
oh yeah, there's more of that.
All the goofball stuff. It sounds like there's a lot of goofball stuff in this one.
It's goofy. It's It's very anime, I'd say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like cool surprises.
But then you get like that motorcycle race towards the end of the first one. That's so cool. So
oh my god, Eric, I haven't even talked about the card game.
Go on.
Oh my goodness. So Queen's Blood, it's basically the next Gwent. It's
hell
kind of. So there are like 170 odd cards in the game, and you'll unlock like 4 opponents at once as you're traveling the world. So you'll take them on, win a card, and progress your rank as you go. And there's one sequence where you're like compete in this massive tournament, and there's like a meta narrative revolving around the origins of Queen's Blood, which is really cool. But basically, there are 3 rows, and you're trying to win 2 of the 3 rows by getting the most points and taking advantage of your abilities, using like monster cards and so on. And
like
it's very simple. Yeah, it's very Marvel Snappy. It's simple to the point where a game will only take a few minutes, but it's also addictive, because if you lose, you're like, oh shit, like, if my draw was slightly different, or if I put something there, then I would have won. So you want to just keep going. And oh my god, it's a real good card game, Eric.
Nice.
To the point where I'm like, ooh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm just going to play this for 2 hours. And I did do that.
Yeah, you should have led with that. That's all I need to hear.
You can unlock, once you get to the post game, you can unlock cards for all of the party members. So I've got a Cloud card and a Barrett card.
Can you get foils?
Oh.
Holographics?
You can get pixel ones, so it's close.
Oh, nice.
So, well, I don't have a pixel one, but there has been a pixel one in my vicinity. So I'm kind of thinking they could do variants of this. If they release this as a standalone thing with like the new stuff, I would pay 15 quid for it, like happily.
Ooh, I like that a lot. Okay.
It's good.
Very cool. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
Oh, it's surprisingly gay. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm not surprised that you say that, but okay.
There's a few. I can't. No, because I went on this adventure, right? I saw some lesbians in the first town, and I thought, something gay going on here. Then I came back like 5 hours later, and they were talking about going out, and I was like, oh, good for you. And then like 20 hours later, I saw them at the beach, and I was like, oh my god, they're there again. And then like 10 hours later, I saw them at the Gold Saucer, and I was like, the gays are there again. And there's a lot of moments of like really cool natural queerness in this, and also it speaks to how the world evolves around you in a way that Final Fantasy 16 really didn't, unfortunately. And it's similar to, I wrote something online on TheGamer where I said Rebirth is Final Fantasy's Breath of the Wild moment, where it like takes what we love about classic Final Fantasy, but sort of like modernizes and instills what that means in like a really special way, in terms of like the battle system, the characters, the melodramatic storytelling, and this world that is like vast but also incredibly intimate in the way it's executed, to the point where it changes alongside you, so you're not just existing in a vacuum where you're trying to save the world. Like, you'll go back to a town from the beginning of the game at the end, and people will be talking about the events that happened, or relationships will have developed between side characters that you weren't there to witness, but they still happened. And a lot of that stuff is evident throughout the entire game, which just makes it infinitely more immersive and interesting to care about, because it doesn't feel like so much that you're having an influence on the world. It feels like it just exists without you, which is a very hard thing for open world games to do, especially JRPGs, because I've always found this to be the territory of stuff like The Witcher or Baldur's Gate or someone like that. But this feels like, I think they wanted Final Fantasy 16 to be a new direction for the series, and it is in some ways, but like, I want to see a new mainline Final Fantasy with new characters and stuff that adopts the mold that this game is going for.
Yeah.
I think that would be more exciting.
And I feel like when Remake came out, I was saying this is the direction Kingdom Hearts should go too.
Right? Because Kingdom Hearts is too bogged down in the nonsense. But there's a lot of nonsense in Rebirth, but it's still executed in a way where it's well written and well presented enough that you can look past that and still care.
Yeah.
I don't think Kingdom Hearts does that as well. Well, not nearly as well, because Kingdom Hearts 3 is nonsense. But, and this is not nonsense. Like, when the weird stuff happens, you're like, so what does that mean? But then you come around on it and you're like, okay, I can roll with this. That's what I was like at the end. I was like, oh, I see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Like, you know. Oh, yes, it's really good. It's my favorite game of the year so far. I rarely do this. Normally when I review something, I'm like, oh, I should have scored it lower. But now I've played it for another week. I'm like, it could have been 5 out of 5. If I was in the right mood, it could have been.
Very cool. Okay. Well, that review is linked down in the description if you want to read more of Jade's thoughts about Final Fantasy VII
Read it. It's a good one.
Yeah. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, and visit us at thegamer.com. That's the gamer, no space.